If you've got a DJI Osmo Pocket 3, you have one of the best cameras of the year. But are you getting the best footage that you could actually be getting with it? Good news, because in this video, I got 10 shots that will turn you from a beginner to a pro with your next creative project. These tips are not only applicable to this camera, but are also applicable to other bigger gimbals if you decide to upgrade. Stay to the end because the last shot will surprise you. So let's get our Pocket 3 here and have a go. In order to pull off these moves, we will be using video mode, which should be the default mode as soon as you turn on your camera. But if you'd like, you can also use the slow motion mode as well. But for this demonstration, I'll be using the video mode alongside the following settings. Let's begin with the top menu settings. On the bottom left hand corner, we can go ahead and scroll down to our joystick settings, which is called joystick speed, okay? And here I'm gonna slide so that our zoom is set to 1 and our gimbal is set to 1. Then in the same menu, we'll go ahead and turn on grid lines for better composition, and we can find that by scrolling down a little more. And it's called reference line, right under sounds. And I'll just tick that to grid line. All right, we're gonna go back to the top menu settings here. And on the right hand side, we have the gimbal mode, one all the way to the right. And I'm gonna have it set to follow. Okay, we're set here. Go back and go back to the main page here, where we will then go to the bottom menu and slide up. I like to record in 4K as our resolution and 24 frames per second. Otherwise, I will record in 60 frames per second so that we can go ahead and have the option to slow down our footage in post and have that option. If it's easier on your computer, you can also shoot in 1080p and shoot at 60 frames per second, which allows you the same ability to slow down your footage afterwards, at least in a 24 frames per second timeline. For my exposure settings, since we're focusing more on movement, I'll just be leaving them on auto, and if anything, I'll just be setting my white balance, or the WB here, set to 5500 Kelvin or 5600 Kelvin, since I'm shooting outside during the day. Now that we have that all set, the first shot that we have is the push in, push out shot. The push in shot will bring us into the space of our environment or our subject, and the push out shot will do the opposite, as if we were exiting or giving room to our subject. How do we do this? We will first select our subject by pointing our camera at them, hit record, and lock off our camera by pressing and holding the joystick. Then we'll walk forward or back in relation to our subject. The pro tip to making the shot steady is what they call the ninja walk. We want to achieve a smooth walk by rolling off our feet in a heel-toe fashion to take out the up and down movements from our Pocket 3. And if you really want to go advanced, for our next shot we have the Hitchcock Shot, aka the dolly zoom, popularized by the English director Alfred Hitchcock. This shot keeps your foreground relatively the same while the background changes, giving the appearance of a distorted world for our subject. How is this done? We can begin by standing close to our subject, tapping the zoom button on the screen, and then hitting record. Now we will slowly walk back and press up on our joystick, which will cause the camera to digitally zoom at the same time. It should look something like this. We can get a similar effect by doing the opposite, standing far away while being completely zoomed in. Then as we walk closer to our subject, we'll be pressing down on the joystick to zoom out. And this is what that would look like. Normally this is done in camera, but as a pro tip, you can actually do the zoom digitally for a more consistent zoom, or even a speed ramp if your video software allows you. So if you only have a push in or a push out shot, feel free to add a digital zoom in your software. But don't worry if that is not what you're going for our other shots are easier than this, like the low shot. These kinds of shots can often give our subject a hero kind of look, or just bring more life out of the environment around our subject. To do this, we'll be using the selfie mode, which can be activated by triple pressing our joystick, and then we'll just turn our camera upside down in order to get the lowest angle while still being able to see the screen. The key here is to actually catch a little bit of the ground to make the shot more dynamic. The pro tip here to make the shot easier to frame is by using an articulating magic arm with a phone mount to be able to use your phone as a tilting screen while it's connected to your Pocket 3. For our next shot, we have the tracking shot. This is a simple shot that allows for showing a transition from one scene to another, or just showing some kind of movement forward or backward in your literal story. We can film our subject by following them from the side, from the front, or the back. We'll begin with a side one where we have our camera at around chest height. Then we'll tap on our subject on the screen to make sure that we got them in focus. And then we'll hit record. After that, we'll lock off our gimbal by pressing and holding the joystick, and then follow our subject as they walk, while still being able to maintain the same distance from them at the same speed. For our pro tip here, we can best pull off the shot by keeping our subject in a certain part of the frame. And this is where the grid lines will come in handy. Usually if our subject is walking to the right side of the frame, I will keep them on the left vertical line. If they're walking to the left side of the frame, then I'll keep them on the right vertical line. We can also accomplish the same thing with the smart framing on the left menu here, and select one of the boxes on the left side. This will help track our subjects even better when we can't do it ourselves, especially if we have a lot of obstacles in our way. But try not to do that. You know, safety first. If I'm tracking my subject from the front or from the back, I will usually keep my subject centered in the frame. Otherwise, if the landscape is interesting enough, I'll have my subject on the left side with the environment on the right, or vice versa. While we still have this kind of momentum, let's talk about the orbiting shot. With this shot, we can show more of our subject's environment and how they are immersed in it. Or perhaps we can just give them that feeling of being drawn into the world in a loopy and spinny kind of way. We can pull off this shot by having our subject stand in the center and looking at the camera. Then as a camera operator, we will be the ones moving around them while they continue to follow the camera and looking at it at all times. I would hope that our subject's head doesn't spin 360 degrees at some point, so we'll have them turn around completely in the opposite way that we are spinning. If your subject has a loose outfit like a dress, then it would make for a dreamy slow-mo shot. But if these shots are making you dizzy, then let's stick to these standard shots that you could use for any shoot. Like the slider shot. This shot can be used in your establishing shots to be able to help the audience dwell on the scene some more, and to help with some perspective if you use the shot to complement another wide establishing shot. In order to do this, we set our feet wide apart, lock our gimbal by pressing and holding the joystick, and then start filming with most of our weight on one leg, and then slowly shifting our weight to the other leg, all while moving our gimbal from left to right or right to left. Pro tip here is to exaggerate, and the best way that we can exaggerate our movement in a cinematic way is to include some foreground. With the grid lines that we enabled at the beginning, we can keep the environment on the bottom third of the frame, and then slowly slide from one side to the other as our foreground starts to change a bit while still keeping our subject in focus. And if we want to grab even more interest, we can turn this shot into a parallax shot. With this, we can further pull our audience into the scene by tracking our subject with a slider shot, yet also give a kind of wild look of our background changing as we move the camera itself left to right or right to left. I know that was kind of weird to explain, but for this first parallax shot, I will slide from left to right, and knowing this, I will then move my joystick so that my camera is framing my subject on the right vertical line. Then I'll hit record and start shifting my weight from left to right like a slider shot. But this time, I'll be using the joystick to follow my subject from right to left. Pretty cool, right? Here's what it looks like going the other way too. But if you really want to throw variety into your establishing shots at the beginning of your video, you want to try a crane shot. This is another means of having an establishing shot that usually involves, well, a crane. I'm pretty sure you've seen plenty of these shots in movies that you've watched that helps give more perspective to your location. And since not all of us are crane operators, we can do our best to imitate one. For this particular shot, we'll go back to the top menu and change our gimbal mode to tilt locking so that we can better keep the shot steady. Now we can begin with our camera pointed in the direction where we want to focus on, pressing record, and then raising our camera up high, and then proceed to slowly lower our camera. Pro tip here to help sell this look is to use some kind of monopod of sort to really exaggerate the height. I didn't have one, so instead I used a light stand extension pole. As an alternative, I tried to stand on top of a table in the park, but do what feels right for you. But don't feel like you have to go out and get a monopod for this, because without it, we have better gimbal control or movement of our camera, but no worries. This next shot doesn't take any extra accessories, so here we have the Vortex Shot. This shot is a creative shot that works well when passing through different frames of architecture or during activities at your location. This camera movement involves the rolling of the camera from one side to the other while combining it with a push in or push out movement. Fortunately, we have a smart mode to help with this via this icon on the left, and the bottom left hand corner we have this spin shot, and we can go ahead and select 180 degrees and we're good to go. You'll notice that our camera is now pointed up, which makes us hold our camera on the side like so. Next, we can hit the spinning icon or the arrow icon and then proceed to push in or push out for our shot. Usually I'll do this kind of shot when my wife plays the piano every now and then, but if there's any shot that you'll nail, it'll be this last one, the static shot. We can use this for establishing shots, dialogue, and pretty much everything for our video. Now, all of our shots thus far have incorporated movement, but just as it is important to have movement, it is important to also incorporate no movement. Yes, the main selling point of getting a camera and gimbal system like this is to have stability and smoothness. But unless you plan to actually shoot action, it isn't always necessary. Because of this, we don't have to carry around a tripod and take time to set up. All we have to do is just keep it steady, lock off our camera with the joystick, and we're good. The pro tip here is to make pleasing compositions in your frame. Doesn't have to be spectacular, but it just has to make sense. Similar to that of photography. Use any or all these shots and your next project has got some wow. And if you want your shots to look even better on your Pocket 3, consider learning how to correct and grade your footage over here.